I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to amend the definition of terminal illness in the Welfare Reform Act 2012 and for connected purposes. Mr Deputy Speaker, I must declare an interest as the Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Motor Neurone Disease. My husband, my brother-in-law and my mother-in-law all died from motor neurone disease. Today I will place emphasis on motor neurone disease, but there are other conditions which equally apply. These will be explored at second reading. The current definition of terminally ill is a person suffers from progressive disease and the person's death is consequent of that disease can reasonably be expected within 6 months. A prognosis of having 6 months or less to live is needed for a clinician to issue a DS 1500, allowing claimants to apply for benefits under the special rules for terminal illness provision. Special rules enable access to disability benefits quickly by fast-tracking applications to the highest level of benefits payments, an issue of paramount importance for people with limited time to live. 3,618,000 people claim PIP. Only 3%, or 109,000, claim under the special rules process. My bill recognises that the 6 months eligibility to criteria to access the DS 1500 is far too restrictive. DWP figures showed that as of April 2018, there were 1,565 PIP claims from people with motor neurone disease. Only 650, or around 42%, had claimed via the special rules. As parliamentarians, we have all met terminally ill people who have failed to access benefits via the standard process. People under immense emotional and physical stress. People coming to terms with their terminal illness diagnosis. People having to navigate their way through the burdensome and time-consuming benefits process, facing distress, anxiety and fear. This will increase with the rollout of universal credit. Someone who doesn't qualify under the 6-month special rules faces the prospect of having to attend an interview with a work coach to discuss their aspirations for work and sign up to a claimant commitment, highly inappropriate for an individual who will never return to work. Our current assessment process is capability-driven. Can you walk, make a cup of tea, put your socks on? This results in high scores for those with physical, identifiable limitations, such as a spinal injury, but doesn't recognise an unpredictable, progressive, degenerative condition for which no treatment is available to mitigate the process of the disease. The change I am proposing will, only for the terminally ill, provide access to benefits which is driven by clinical diagnosis. The current 6 months of terminal illness is problematic for unpredictable conditions such as motor neurone disease. A third of people with motor neurone will die within a year of diagnosis, and half will die within 2 years. Identifying those who are likely to die quickly and those who will live longer is very difficult, indeed impossible. Allowing medical professionals to determine whether an illness is terminal would give terminally ill people the chance to access their benefits they need quickly and with dignity. Earlier this year, the All-Party Group took evidence from James Douglas, who was diagnosed with motor neurone disease just before his 30th birthday. He'd recently moved into a new home with his partner, and 1 week later, his son was born. He was then told he wouldn't see his 32nd birthday. James was struggling at work and was forced to reduce his hours. The financial implications on his family were crushing. He went through the arduous process of claiming PIP and was awarded 0 points in every category of his claim. Weeks later, he was given a DS 1500 by his consultant. Martin Bennell also has motor neurone disease. He described to MPs how he received 0 points on his universal credit assessment and was told to seek work despite struggling to walk, breathe and talk. A DS 1500 came from his consultant, despite his GP telling him it could only be accessed by people with cancer. This is an all too common belief. The DWP recently wrote to Martin, asking if he wanted to retrain and learn a new skill. These are not isolated cases, and far too many people with terminal conditions have had to endure an incredibly stressful time to access benefits. People with terminal conditions should not suffer the anxiety of compelling, lengthy and telling details about capability or attend face-to-face assessments when a clinical judgment can show they are terminally ill. The current definition of terminal illness has created a variation of how it's interpreted and discrepancies in doctors' willingness to submit a DS 1500 for people with such conditions. Some interpret the definition broadly, others feel the current criteria restricts their ability to support special rule applications. The change proposed is modest, but has the potential to help many. It is shocking that terminally ill people and their doctors have at times been challenged by assessors on whether a claim has 6 months to live or not. Astonishingly, 13 out of 21 healthcare professionals who gave evidence to the all-party group said their assessors had contacted them to question the validity of the DS 1500. This bill seeks to reflect the change to the definition of terminal illness recently announced in Scotland. In order for someone to be considered as terminal, they have agreed to remove the time limit of having a life expectancy of 6 months or less. Instead, the clinical judgment of a registered medical practitioner will determine whether the person is terminally ill. When there are no effective disease-mitigating treatments and disease is progressing rapidly, death becomes inevitable. Doctors know they cannot verify with accuracy death within 6 months, and such a time statement is cruel to the patient and their family struggling to come to terms with their illness and with dying. Allowing a clinical judgment to determine whether an individual has a terminal illness will create a fairer and compassionate system. To support clinicians when determining a terminal diagnosis, the proposals in Scotland allow the Chief Medical Officer, in consultation with registered medical practitioners, to set definitions in regulations, defining whether an individual has a diagnosed condition that has no further treatment available and will lead to death. Both the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Nursing Officer in Scotland have reviewed and fully support the amendments as the best way to achieve timely support for those with a terminal illness. This bill will create parity with Scotland, generating consistency across the UK, and reflects society's recognition that our benefit system should support, not challenge or interrogate the terminally ill. It would also reflect the recommendations of the independent review of PIP in Northern Ireland, which supported the changes to how terminal illness should be defined. There is support from the medical community. 13 leading neurologists have called on the government to emulate the changes of Scotland. Dr. Nick Sharma, a consultant neurologist at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery, told the all-party group that despite his years as a specialist treating people with motor neurone disease, he cannot predict its progression or the life expectancy of people with the disease. Other specialists have told me it is difficult to predict when someone has 6 months left to live with cancer, and it's close to impossible with unpredictable conditions such as heart disease and COPD. We have consulted widely. I've worked closely with the Motor Neurone Disease Association, Marie Curie, the Royal College of General Practitioners. I sought the views of the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Nursing Officer for England. Palliative care specialists have agreed to liaise in helping to produce guidance on a definition ahead of second reading. In Scotland, they received cross-party support, and we have that same support here. Mr. Speaker, I spent many years helping terminally ill people claim benefits before coming to this House. I cared for my husband Steve and can attest to the mental and emotional chaos of dealing with a terminal condition. The unknown time you have must be spent not about worrying benefits and accessing benefits or keeping a roof over your head. It must be spent in love, laughter, and taking the painful journey together with dignity and compassion. It is time for this government, this Parliament, to support and ease that journey.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.